taking a bit of a pause in our series of talking to athletes on their way to Milan Cortina because it's time to go back in time to, in my opinion, what was the greatest Winter Olympics of all time, which was 2006 Turin. And we get to talk to somebody who basically became a legend at those Olympics, in the greatest Olympics ever, and in the craziest sport in all the Olympics. We're talking about Olympic gold medalist in the skeleton, the one and only Duff Gibson. Duff, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for the invitation, and you've already piqued my interest. Why? Because I'm totally. I hope you don't mind. I'm just going to jump right in, but
Go.
I'm biased that the Torino Olympics was the best. I'm biased, of course, but I'm really curious why you think that.
Yeah, for me, it was, for one, seeing Canada excel, knowing we're that much closer. It's the last one before Vancouver, and there was such a big push we were hearing about for years about Canada really wants to get at the top of the podium. And I mean, we got so close. It was like third place overall standings at the end of that. And there was so much emphasis put on hockey in that. I mean, it was almost obnoxious, the amount of promotion in hockey leading up to those Olympics, and hockey just did not work out well. And it seemed like everything else that we medaled in, everything else Canada succeeded in, just made those Olympics so much better. And especially skeleton. I mean, it was complete. We'll talk a little bit about how much dominance Canada had during the 2006 Olympics. But yeah, it's been my favorite for the last 20 years. So, I mean, you're the second 20-year anniversary guest that we've been able to have on here from those Olympics.
Well, my pleasure. And I would add to what you said by saying the men's hockey was a dramatic failure.
Exactly, yes.
The women's hockey was the Olympics where Haley Wickenheiser said, I heard that the American women were standing on our flag, and now I want to know if they want me to autograph it for them.
I love those burns. You had another famous Canadian represent Australia winning a gold medal at those games. I just want to point out Dale Begg-Smith.
That was in the moguls. Yeah.
Any opportunity that. I mean, your journey though in the sport, it's so incredible to think that you started skeleton when you were 33. Now, this is, I like saying that out loud because that's not that far removed from how old I am right now. So it gives me hope that I can maybe start a career that late in a different sport. But prior to skeleton, though, you had a pretty diverse background in multiple different sports because you've also got a pretty significant family history in the Olympics as well. You had an uncle who went to the Olympics. Your dad should have been at the Olympics, but his sport was cut last minute. So sort of give us a bit of a background in your sporting career before you ultimately made this switch into skeleton.
Well, respect to you, Ben, for doing your homework. You've already said a few things that not everyone knows, especially with regard to my dad, because it was, he would have been competing in judo in Mexico City, and for whatever reason, I mean, they had wrestling, they had boxing, but they didn't have judo, and the excuse given was the altitude. So why do you have wrestling? But they had it, Tokyo, which it's Japan's sport. So maybe it took a couple of Olympics before it became part of the regular program.
Yeah.
I don't know why it sounds to me that the altitude was an excuse. But anyway, my Olympic journey was not to, the average swimmer would take swimming lessons when they were a kid and get good enough that at some point think, oh, if I was a little faster, I might be able to try out for an Olympic team. For me, it was my dream came from 2 specific weeks in the summer of 1976. I'm dating myself, of course, but the Montreal Olympics. And I've asked myself, what is it about Montreal that just had such a powerful effect on me? It did. I've been obsessed with the Olympics ever since. And part of it would have been my age, and I would have maybe remembered the ones before, but it was also, there were very iconic moments in Montreal, like Nadia Comaneci getting perfect 10s in gymnastics. That I can't think of another sport where they've said, they defined what perfect is and said that is perfect. And then they changed judging style, so that never happened again. And another one was the then Bruce Jenner winning the decathlon. And the commentators back then said, well, he's won the decathlon. He's the world's greatest athlete. And I think for a 9-year-old, like, that's impactful. That stuck with me. And I also had a volleyball coach in elementary school who was a referee at the Montreal Olympics. So that moment, that 2 week period just made me think I want to be a part of that. I don't care what sport it is. So I say I did 5 different sports each time thinking this is the one. I'm going to train and train and train, and I'm going to the Olympics in blank. And I was wrong the first 4 times, but ultimately arriving at skeleton at age 33. But I had done 7 years of bobsleigh before that, and typically power sports leading up to that. So I had done a great deal of learning and understanding what worked for me. And I was a much different athlete when I arrived at skeleton. I was already trained specifically in what worked for me. And I had spent so much time in a sliding sport already. So it wasn't, it was like I had 7 years of usable information that allowed me to jump in at a high level in a relatively short time in skeleton.
It's interesting because we talked to John Montgomery years ago, and his story was similar, where he just wanted to go to the Olympics. I don't care what it's in. I'm going to be at the Olympics, and like he got in at a later age. He was probably in his late 20s or something. But we recently had Hallie Clark on here as well, if you're familiar with her, who's probably Canada's best hope of medaling in the upcoming Olympics, and she was talking about how there's been like a very, very recent shift in younger athletes getting into the sport, and that historically it has been more a sport where older athletes. Is it because there's a lot that can be lended to the sport by having experience in other things, like obviously bobsled be one, but I mean other sports you mentioned, leading into that. What is it specifically about skeleton where it is something that somebody can enter at a later age?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer. I mean, it sort of followed the path of bobsleigh. And bobsleigh, you have athletes who've been track stars, for example. There's been some very, Glenroy Gilbert, for example, very high profile track stars. And they can immediately, if you're pushing and not driving, you can immediately jump in at the highest level. So that's, and you have football players and various athletes that their previous training lends itself to bobsleigh. With skeleton, it's something where, I don't know, when I started, part of me switching to skeleton was based on the fact that the IOC said, okay, we're going to put skeleton back on the Olympic program. And I was just the age that I was. And I was sick of the politics and the bravado and the cost associated with bobsleigh at the time. And I remember Pierre Lueders was the top dog when I was doing bobsleigh, and his head at the time was $80,000. They're well into 5 figures now, 6 figures now. So you were literally looking at a second mortgage on your house or something to get the equipment to help you compete. And so when they switched, that was just, well, I'm the age I am. The men's team that I was on, we were all older, not, I guess I was the oldest. I had a record for being the oldest there for a while, but it changed after a while when it became an Olympic sport. Then people started to be interested in it at a younger age. But whether you are a track athlete, someone coming from another sport and bringing your skills to it, or you're starting the youngest you can, which is when you get a driver's license, it still takes, I would say, 5 years. I just give sort of a standard answer. Some could do it quicker, some would take longer. It takes about 5 years for you to feel the pressure changes and to have the chance, at least, of getting to the higher levels of the sport in terms of the technical ability.
You can imagine, I mean, for the sport itself, 54 years, if I'm not mistaken, the gap between 1948 and 2002 for it to return to the Olympics. So a big deal. But were you, before you made that switch, once it was announced, what was the scene like, do you know, in skeleton? I know it's sort of kind of under the same banner as bobsled in terms of federation, but did you sort of follow the sport? Were you familiar with it? Or was it something that as soon as they made that announcement, that's when you really like, oh, skeleton, let's look into this a little bit more?
Yeah, you mentioned it was only a part of the Olympics in St. Moritz when St. Moritz was the host city. But there was a World Championships, there was a World Cup circuit. It existed in its own right that entire time. It just wasn't an Olympic event. And so I knew, just being at the track at the same time, you knew the same athletes. A lot of the athletes tried bobsleigh, tried skeleton. There's the kind of person who jumps into that because it looks fun, it looks exciting, and you sort of have a daredevil attitude you want to try. So some people tried both of those sports. A lot of times you would be recruited for one and not the other because of a specific body type. So at this moment, I'm a hair under 6 feet and 205 approximately. And I'm about as big as the competitive ones get in skeleton. And that may have even changed slightly because I know since I retired, they've changed some of the weight limits for the men's event. And so that has an effect. So this is a long-winded way of saying the sport recruits something. You have younger people taking it up, but there is a body type that suits skeleton, and it's a smaller person than the body type that suits bobsleigh. But there are always exceptions. There's always overlaps. There was the Canadian 4-man push record until recently. It was the track record. So a very, very fast 4-man push time had a guy named Todd Crawford on the back, and he was 175 pounds. And by bobsleigh standards, that's a pretty small person. It's closer to a bodybuilder than a track runner. But 175 is small, but he was obviously very effective because of his top end speed. So after everyone else got in, he was one of the few people who could still be adding some acceleration to the sled. I sort of got sidetracked there.
You do that a lot on this show, Duff. It's fine. You'll fit in perfectly.
It's usually Ben, but
it's usually me, but welcome to the club.
I did want to ask, if I have my math right here. I mean, at the age that you get into the sport, you're probably a couple of years out from Salt Lake City. But realistically, likely looking more like, Torino would be your shot. When you're making the decision that you want to make the jump from bobsled into skeleton, I mean, who do you go through? Do you have coaches? Do you have, the federation itself? Like who actually makes a call and says, you know what, we'll let you kind of run with this? And what was the reaction? Was the reaction, well, we think that this might be a good fit for you. It's definitely worth giving a try.
Skeleton was very welcoming. Very welcoming. And it's up to you where you want to try. This is a very behind the scenes kind of a thing that I haven't shared with many people. Perfect for a podcast, maybe. I always had the feeling that in bobsleigh, they didn't really think I was the have what it takes. And I don't know why that was. And when I switched to skeleton, after I had won a world championships in skeleton, Ivo Ferriani, who is he's the president of the International Sliding Federation. But at the time when I made that switch, he was the I don't know what the title is, the president of the Canadian Federation. So at the time, I guess someone said, I don't know about this Duff character. Do we want him to be representing Canada in skeleton? And Ivo said, yes, he earned the place. He won the selections. He's going to be on the team, whatever that conversation was. And he didn't tell me that until I had won a world title in 2004. So 5 years later, wow. He said, I had to argue to give you that first chance to be on the team. And he thought, I assume he was telling me because I had won a world title and I would take it in the best, wasn't that a silly thing to think kind of a way? But it just sort of reaffirmed that I kind of had that vibe that I didn't know what they wanted. They wanted me to quit my job. So I was, living out of someone's basement to do it full time. I don't know what it was that I wasn't doing. And then, years later, one of those guys asked me for a reference letter. When I was done skeleton, they asked what the chances were of before the Vancouver Whistler Olympics of me going back to bobsleigh and potentially becoming a pilot again. So it did a 180-degree turn, but it's just funny that people get in their heads that you have what it takes or you don't have what it takes. And what is that based on? I have no idea.
So they're putting you in a box, really.
Yeah.
I guess. And what's the box? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. You'd have to ask them.
It's crazy to think that. And I mean, it's sort of, my next question, you obviously weren't aware of what they were thinking of until many, many years later. So it can't really feed into this question. But I guess I'm asking Duff is when you made the team for 2002, back to when you were saying about this was your dream, you wanted to make the Olympics in some way or another. I mean, can you describe that moment, what that was like? And in hindsight now, knowing what they were thinking of you, does it kind of make it a little bit extra special knowing that back in 2002, they weren't thinking that you had the goods basically to make that team?
Yeah, so I didn't even know that this was a thought in anyone's mind until 2004. And in 2002, it was our last World Cup. You have 8 World Cups and a World Championships is how the circuit works. And on the 8th World Cup before the Salt Lake Olympics, I won my first medal in St. Moritz. I won a bronze medal. And that 3rd place finish earned a spot so Canada could have 3 competitors in the men's division. So by the time, that was a relatively short turnover before my results were earning positions for other team members. So I don't really even think back then. I don't worry about this question of, did I deserve to be on the team? Why would someone think that? It was something that I went through it not knowing it existed. And then I became a world champion and someone said, you know what? That was part of the mindset 3 or 4 years prior.
Do you feel that in hindsight that's a benefit though, Duff? I mean, do you think had you known that at the beginning, that would have affected you differently rather than finding out after the fact?
Well, I moved sports, didn't I? I switched from doing bobsleigh, and I would say after the fact, I mean, I'm not implying that I could have won more medals as a bobsledder, but I'm the most suited to bobsleigh out of the skeleton pool. I was the heaviest, stockiest. I mean, it meant that because I was shorter, wider, less aerodynamic, it meant there was a certain kind of track that I was successful on and a certain kind of track that I wasn't as successful on, because I've always been built more like a bobsledder. So the tracks like Whistler, for example, where you have the highest top end speed well into the 140s, the aerodynamic aspect of it being wider, any formula you've ever seen about wind resistance has frontal surface area is a part of it. And so I have a bigger frontal surface area. So the faster the top end of the track, the less of an advantage of it. Now, being wider, there's an advantage to that as well. If the track requires very hard steering, like Altenburg, like Torino, like Sigulda, for example, where the circuit is just finishing as we're recording this. Those tracks require extremely hard steering, and being a wider, beefier kind of body type, I was more suited to those tracks. And then being heavier, the temperature made a difference for me also. So when we competed in Torino, it was -8. The ice temperature was -8. And if the ice temperature was ever, -0.5, -1, that was too warm for me. And I was, because the rules dictate what a runner is. A runner is a metal bar of a certain diameter. You can't make it a bigger diameter so that it doesn't sink in as much. So there was a limit as to, there was a specific weather condition, a certain type of track that suited me, being a bigger, heavier,
Interesting.
harder steering.
Never heard that described.
Advantage sometimes and a disadvantage.
Fascinating. Sorry to interrupt. It's just more like through all the sliding athletes we've had on, be it bobsleigh, luge, skeleton, I've never quite heard it described that way before. That's very interesting.
Well, I competed for a long time and I coached for a long time also. So I've often thought I have this skill set about sliding down ice really, really fast that I don't use at all in my life anymore, and could. And a lot of it would translate. Like, who's the Australian? I just listened to an episode today, the Australian luge athlete who's now broken into the top.
Alex Palazzo. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting. He talked about lines. What is a race line? What is a fast line to go down the track? Well, I would say in skeleton, and skeleton would be a lot closer to luge than it would to bobsleigh. But the line is where you find an equilibrium whereby you steer as little as possible without steering so little that you go everywhere and you hit a wall, because that's not enough. But every time you steer, that's applying a force to the ice that slows you down. So I don't even think of it. I know I'm a retired athlete and coach now, but I never thought of it as a line. I thought of it as energy conservation.
Yeah, well, we're going to get to turn in a few minutes here, but I do have to ask you briefly about Salt Lake City, because when you're getting into the sport and you've been trying for so many years and so many different sports to get to that Olympic level, you're finally there at Salt Lake City. Were you thinking going into those games, this is my shot, it's now or never, or did you still have in the back of your head, you know what, if this goes well, I've got another 4 years in me? Because it's going to be a different story when you get to Turin, but we'll get to that later.
Because my last World Cup race before Salt Lake was a medal, I thought I had a chance to win a medal. And I wasn't really thinking beyond that. But Salt Lake was not the experience I was hoping for. And I finished 10th, and my mom said, "Oh my God, you finished 10th in the world. You should be so proud." But that's based entirely on your expectations. And if your expectations were, I have a shot at a medal, then 10th is horribly disappointing. And sometimes 20th or 25th is an absolute triumph. It's based entirely on your expectations. And for me, Salt Lake was the motivation for the following 4 years, and realizing there was a moment. It was the day after my race, and I was just at the finish dock. I don't know why. I was watching another event maybe, and I overheard Jim Shea's coach. And Jim Shea was the American slider who won my event in Salt Lake. And his coach said, "Man, when we woke up and it was snowing, I knew we nailed it." And he was talking about the equipment that they chose to use on race day. And me having literally just come from bobsleigh, I had a race set of runners and I had a practice set of runners, which is a very typical bobsleigh kind of mentality. And I realized that other people were constantly tinkering with their equipment, had different equipment for, if the ice was very hard and cold, they had a certain cut of runner that would grab the ice, and you'd be less likely to skid, even though the ice was harder and you wouldn't sink into the ice. Or conversely, if the ice was very soft, you had a very fat spine, a type of runner that wouldn't dig into the ice, because control is not your problem. Your problem is digging into the ice and being slow. So I realized that I hadn't even scratched the surface of what was possible from the technical side. And I was just, relying on the athleticism and steering hard in certain places and relax. I had certain strengths and weaknesses, but I didn't even know what my weaknesses were at that point. And overhearing that made me think I've got so much more that I could achieve. And then the following year, I was 5th overall. And then I was in the medals every time for the next 3 years beyond that. And that was good timing because I was an old man at that point. So my body was falling apart and I needed to move on.
Kind of what you're saying about just the equipment and everything. And it's amazing that an athlete could get to that level and not even know some of these things. I mean, funding obviously probably is a big part in that too. It just sort of reminded me when I was mentioning Hallie Clark, she won the world championships a couple of years ago. She was famously kind of crashed across the finish line. And she's told me that like, oh, that was actually intentional. I'm like, what do you mean it was intentional? And she's like, well, because you actually, on that one course, you would go faster. You would cross the finish line faster if you crashed on the last turn than if you actually just tried to steer it and go like when you're on the World Cup circuit, are you, it may not be from the beginning, but do you reach a point where you're like, okay, I know this track, I got to do this. I know this track. And there are some of those little quirks that you come across where you're like, that's where the experience starts to kick in. These different courses, these different tracks, you're going to have to respond in different ways.
Well, every track is different. And if I remember correctly, she won in Winterberg, and that is the one spot where if you don't steer at all, you kind of flip off the end, but you're not steering, you're not slowing yourself down. And I guess, if it's the last run, then you're not worried about wrecking your runners and making them,
or looking graceful.
Yeah, or looking graceful. Yeah, I would take the disastrous entry if that won me a world title for sure. Yeah. So yeah, every track is different. Every track requires. Yeah, if you look at it, here's one way of looking at it. If I come into this corner and I do nothing, what will happen to the sled? Where will I go? Okay, so if that's sort of your frame of reference. If I do nothing, what will happen? Okay, you're going to go up to the roof, then you're going to be too low here, and you're going to flop off the end. Okay, well, I have to do a certain amount of work to prevent that from happening. And then you factor in where is it going to point me? And then you just sort of do the calculations of what's the least amount of work that I can do, including there are a few spots, and Salt Lake City is one of them, where you can fight it really hard as you come onto a corner. If you do nothing, you go to the roof. So I'm going to fight it really hard so I don't go to the roof. But then halfway through the corner, I'm sinking so low. So I'm going to steer up as hard as I can so I don't sink so much, but I'm still going to be fighting that last pressure at the end so I don't go too far to the roof. There's a corner in Salt Lake City where if you just let it just naturally puts you in the right spot. So there are a few tricks in a few areas, but every track is different. There was a specific moment in my second World Cup ever, which was at not a very difficult track, not a very fast track in Innsbruck. But corner 9 in Innsbruck was just different than anything that I had ever seen before. And I couldn't get out of that corner without tapping the left wall. And so some of them are puzzles, and you have to watch a lot, watch the video of the previous race, talk to who will ever talk to you about it, etc.
I love hearing it because obviously there's so few tracks in the world, right, that you obviously get to know them pretty well over the years. Talking about Salt Lake, I mean, Colin talking about Turin being his favorite Winter Olympics of all time. Mine's Salt Lake, not to take away from Turin, love Turin. But, I mean, so many great stories in Salt Lake. You mentioned Jimmy Shea, but the one that I always forget about is that Ireland was so close to an Olympic winter medal in 2002, with Clifton finishing 4th, which there's a trivia fact. I don't know if many people out there would know that Ireland finished 4th at a Winter Olympics and were that close to a Winter Olympic medal. I mean, what was the mood around that event? Obviously, your first Olympics, I understand that, but for the skeleton community, given that it had been 54 years, you were seeing some, great stories like with Jimmy, Clifton. Like, was that in terms of just the mood and the vibe, like a fun event taking your result away, of course, Duff, but like just in terms of the overall feeling of what that was like at those Olympics.
Well, it was, to your point, it was everybody's first Olympics.
Yeah, of course.
Right. There were people who had been in the sport for, more than a decade and maybe had a number of world titles to their credit. But that was everybody's first Olympics because it hadn't been a part of the program since 48. The pressure, I think that this is a product of the fact that the average person doesn't know what skeleton is, or they've only seen it because they've watched it once every 4 years. It was on TV when they were watching the last Winter Olympics. I have a very strong sense, like in Torino, this is my second chance. It is my last chance of getting an Olympic medal. Ask any slider. I would say it's also a reflection of the fact that it's not like swimming. They hand out a gold, silver, and bronze once every 4 years. 3 men and 3 women can call themselves Olympic medalists in my sport every 4 years. That's it. It's not like swimming. If you're a great swimmer and you're American, you gotta, then you can be on the relay also, probably. Yeah. So it's at least 2 if you're really good. And even bobsleigh, you've got the 2 and the 4, and for the women, the mono and the mono. 2. So it's, for skeleton, I've asked a few times of my competitors, how many world medals would you give up for one Olympic bronze? And the answer is usually all of them. There's a very strong sense. Here's what I lived in Salt Lake. It was a real downer, but it became a motivator for me very quickly after. You do a ton of media, and they want to know, who was your grade 3 homeroom teacher, and is she proud of you? And what's, your parents and everything. Tons, hours of interviews, print, television, the news. I'm a firefighter here in Calgary. So that's a big, local firefighter is going to go to his second Olympics and all of this stuff. And when I was ranked 6th in the world. I had just won my first medal. And when I didn't win a medal and it was over, that whole thing just up and moves to the next person. And it's over and no one cares. There's no more interest because they're on to the next person who might win a medal. And I would say this also, in Salt Lake City, there were far fewer events, right? So if you look at the medal tables, Canada won 17 medals, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. But if you're a part of that team, you are surrounded by medalists. Every hockey player has a gold medal. Every curler has a medal. And then you add speed skaters, figure skaters, Becky Scott, that was the Olympics. She, all these supreme performances in terms of numbers. Like, how many people did I just list? Like that's 50 hockey players. That's 10 curlers. You're surrounded by people who've contributed to the medal total for Canada. And so for all those years that I thought I want to be an Olympian, that experience was just me realizing that my goal was not to be an Olympian. It was to win a medal at the Olympics.
I mean,
and I mean no disrespect at whatsoever to someone who goes and doesn't win a medal, because the reason that's what it had to be for me was because that was within my capability.
And when you get to Torino, kind of talking about, what the mood is and everything. And as you're mentioning, like the numbers and everything, I think the thing that I mentioned in the beginning that really stands out is how dominant we were. It wasn't just we won a medal in skeleton. We won 50% of the medals in skeleton coming out of those Olympics. You go away with the gold. Jeff Payne goes away with the silver, which I'll follow-up question for that too. Melissa Hollingsworth has a bronze. I mean, a full set for Canada in the skeleton. Now you're at that level of like you're almost at a curling team, not quite at a hockey team, but you're coming through with 3 medals. I mean, just for, I guess the team itself, what was that like? Was that like a huge success for the program, for you and the teammates as a whole? We didn't just come home with a medal. We came home with 50% of the medals.
You shattered in. That's what Colin's actually saying. You shattered in. Yeah.
Well, and we were, so I've got like 3 stories popping through my head when you ask me that, Colin.
Tell them all.
Okay. Here's point number 1. We were a quarter of a second away from going for second, third in the men's event. And it in a sense, that's a regret. That kind of breaks my heart because Paul Bohm, who finished 4th, has always been, was always, and will always be the consummate teammate. And with Jeff and I, we butted heads at the beginning, and it was, like it's an individual sport. I'm not going to help you to beat me kind of a thing. Very respectful. He was, if I beat him in a race in those early years, he would literally be the first person to shake my hand. So it was always respectful, but Paul was never anything other than the consummate teammate. And what happened in that race is something that happens every once in a while in skeleton, which is, especially when the ice is -8. And so you sweep out the groove. And if there's just a little chunk of ice at exactly the wrong spot, then the sled coming out of the groove goes boop sideways and you hit the wall. And that's what happened to Paul in the first run, which cost him more than the gap to 3rd place. And it's not something that's done on purpose. It's something that would be tricky for an elite skeleton athlete to make that happen, to skid the sled underneath them and hit the wall. That would be tricky to do on purpose. It's something that just happens every once in a while because a chunk of ice fell out at the wrong spot and was literally at exactly the precise location to make a sled skid as it comes out of the groove. So it was a hair away from 1st, 2nd, 3rd in the men's division. Now that was going through my head, so I completely forgot what the rest of your question was. Colin, just the I guess the entire team feel that you got Melissa winning a bronze as well. You've cleaned up with 50% of the medals, and I guess kind of along with that, I was curious. Didn't want to quite bring up the bad news part of that, but you do have a team member who came this close to winning as well, right? So I mean, but just kind of jump on what I was saying before. I wanted to ask about Jeff Payne. I find it interesting the more we talk to athletes that you think when you have 2 athletes from the same country, they are going to be more, if it's not me, I'm glad it was you. And I'm sure there is an element to that as well. But there had to have been a rivalry even going into those games, knowing it's like, it's me or Jeff, and I really hope it's me. I mean, when you guys are battling it out between your runs and pretty much the whole time it's me or Jeff, I mean, is that extra motivation for you? Is it harder to process than if it was Martin Dukers that you're battling it out with? Well, and you have to include Paul in that. I mean, I suppose it was me and Jeff is how you're saying it. It was me or Jeff sometimes, but you have to include Paul in that conversation also because he won his share of World Cup races. And there were Canadian championships where I finished 2nd to Paul, and a reporter would say, "So what happened?" I had 2 great runs and Paul was faster, was the honest answer to that question. So Paul won World Cup races. I only won 4 races in my entire career. It just happened that one was an Olympics, one was World Championships.
Wow.
So I was consistently near the top, or I was good when it mattered most, maybe, but I only ever won 4 world level races. And Paul probably won more than that. So he has to be considered in that equation also. The reason we finished first, second, fourth, and could have, if not for a fluke, finished first, second, third, is because 2 years prior to that, Jeff broke a bone in his foot at the beginning of the year and missed the first half of the season. And I had the best year of my career. I was second overall in the World Cup standings, and I won the World Championships. And at the end of the year, Jeff said, can we sit down and have a coffee? And he said that with the other members of the men's team. And I said, sure. And he absolutely, to his credit, said, I've created a barrier between myself and the rest of the team. It's my fault. I was trying to be protective. I was away for the first half of the season this year, and no one cared. And that's on me. And any joy that I once had in this sport is gone. And can we work together? And that was a turning point. And we did work together. And we had, I'm going to tell you this story, and it makes me wonder, who does this now? Because no one did this then, and it's a way of getting really, really good. But being great at skeleton, in my opinion, is a lot about assimilating a huge amount of information in a relatively short period of time. It's a race to figure out a track before a race. And there was one occasion, and typically, I guess you need to know this too. The way the World Cup circuit works is you have 3 official training days, 2 runs per day, then you have a day off, then a race, then a travel day. You spend about a week in a location, 1 race per week. And so we had driven 10 hours, I don't remember where we were coming from, Winterberg maybe, I don't know if that makes sense on the map, I should look that up. But we're on the highway all day, arrived after dark in Innsbruck, and it's like, where we stay is someone's little hotel. And it's like the kitchen was probably closed for the day. You probably had to wake someone up to get a key for your room. And it was, guys, do you want to go straight to are you starving, or do you want to go straight to the hotel? The kitchen's probably even closed. Or do you want to go straight to the track and see if we can see how the track looks and get on the track and begin our process? And those teammates of mine deserve so much credit for my success, and I hope they would say the same about me for their success. But it's like, okay, let's go to the track. And if someone said, I'm exhausted, no, I can't do it, we probably wouldn't have done it. But we were all of the same mindset. We were all a little older. We were all married, away from our families, missed home, weren't there for some kind of fun tour of Europe or something. We were there for a very specific reason. But it was like, okay, we drove to the front gates. It was locked up for the evening, but we saw that the lights were on in the track. So we drove down a side road and walked through a farmer's field, maybe shin deep snow in running shoes. It gets a little deeper every year. Hopped a fence, climbed into a track that was closed for the evening, but the lights were probably on a timer. And we began our process. And that means someone's at the beginning of the corner, someone's in the middle, someone's at the end. How does it look like there? Well, I don't know. It looks like there's a bit of a buildup at the ice here, and I wonder if it's going to push the high point a little later in the corner. Okay, how does it look like there? Good. What about at the exit? Yeah, this might happen at the exit based on what I remember from the last time we were there. Okay, Jeff, tomorrow, first run for this corner, you try this, I'll try this. We're anticipating this, so Paul, maybe you try holding it up in the middle, etc. And then at some point, the lights shut off, and by moonlight, we hop out of the track and hop a fence, and walk through a farmer's field, uphill both ways, and get in the truck, get in the van, and go wake up someone to get a key to our room, to get a shitty sleep, to start the official training the next morning. And
Wow.
the rhetorical question is, how many people do you think we ran into when we were doing that? And of course, the answer is zero.
Mm.
And that's the only reason that we were successful. And it was markedly different than other teams. Like the American men's team at the time had a former world champion, and the current World Cup overall champion. That was the resume of the three men that we were competing against. But they didn't get along. They didn't like each other. They hired individual coaches so they wouldn't have to work with each other.
Wow.
And for us, it was very simple. We had a coach, but a coach, or you take a video of a certain location, that's one location. My body awareness and Paul's body awareness and Jeff's body awareness, he can tell you exactly how he entered, how long he steered, when he stopped steering, did he hold it up? When did he exit? How did that work? Of every corner of every run, like he was reciting it out of an encyclopedia. That's better than any video. That's better than any one coach could possibly be. And so I had 3 world-beating teammates providing me information. And that honestly, that year that I won the world title and I was second overall, we didn't have a coach. We didn't have a technical coach.
It seems basically that no matter what was going to happen in Turin, that one of you was going to win the gold, essentially. It kind of, obviously it fell your way at the end, but I mean, the fact that you were, a quarter of a second away from sweeping the podium just seems like it was pretty much destiny based on what you're saying there and how you guys were training compared to everybody else.
Well, it's fun. I say it's a lot like downhill skiing, where any given day, Lindsey Vaughn's statistic might, or Michaela Schifrin's data might prove me wrong. But I always say, in the downhill, for example, let me limit it to one event. 4 or 5 different people could win that event on any given any given day, let alone be in the medals. And skeleton is the same. I would think a lot of the sliding sports, that would be exactly the same, if for no reason other than it's too easy to make a mistake that takes you right out of it.
We follow, sort of just on a tangent with that, talking sliding sports. In Australia, at least perspective right now, we're very much into the monobob because of how well Bree's doing. And sort of even sort of the time we're recording this, it's sort of, she's off the back of back-to-back golds, but then the previous 2 events that she was, I think, like 5th and then 3rd. So like, it's just the way that fluctuates. It's very fascinating to kind of see that. And admittedly, I'm one of those guys who, pays more attention to these sort of sports every 4 years and doesn't follow the world scene every 4 years. But it is, I guess, the just how close it is. And I always find it fascinating too, in all 3 of the sliding sport disciplines, that because now we get 4 runs in skeleton, whereas you only had the 2, but like generally after like 2 runs, the order doesn't seem to change that much unless there is obviously a very significant mistake, right? Like that's how fine line it is in terms of, so if you're like top 3 after 2 runs, you're more than likely going to be top 3 at the end of 4 as long as you don't, completely fuck up essentially.
Is that a question?
I had no idea what that was. Let's go with yes, it was a question.
Okay. Because here's what I would add to that. When I started, Altenberg, for example, and I know you mentioned Altenberg, or you're the luge guy. Mm-hmm. I apologize for referring to him as the luge guy.
He's Australia's only luge athlete. He's the luge guy in Australia. Alex will appreciate that. It's all good.
Yeah, well, it's I've listened to one podcast with him, and I'm totally on his side now. It would be a wonderful thing, in my opinion, for someone, anytime someone from a nation who's not traditionally the powerhouse, to be successful, and he's just chipping away and a 5th at a world championships in Altenburg, and Altenburg is so difficult. It's like maybe that's the Aussie way. It's sort of the crazy Canuck idea where the Crazy Canucks were the 70s and early 80s men's downhill skiing team, and they had a historical success in Kitzbühel, where you could lose your life very easily.
Yeah.
And I would say for Bree, that's Sigulda. Sigulda is the scariest track. It's the one time, now this, I'll try and verbally describe this, but they have an Omega series in Sigulda where it's a big sweeping left, 180 degree right, and then another 90 left. And I was going by feel, and I was sort of weightless at the end of the middle, the big sweeping 180 degree right. And I went through the air and landed on my back at the beginning of the last part of the Omega, the left-hand turn. That was the most painful crash I've ever had. And I would say that I probably didn't crash at all in the last couple of years of my career. I didn't really hit a wall hard for the last couple of years for my career. And that one, I landed on my back with my sled on top of me.
Ouch.
And that's not the worst spot in Sigulda. So it takes a certain mindset to go for it and be successful in Sigulda. And I would say Altenburg is exactly the same place. And now I'm going to wind my way back to your original comment about if you're in the top three with one run to go, you're probably still going to end up in the top three. Well, that depends on a few things. When I first started, Altenburg was a different track. And what they did, because you had women's bobsleigh joining when there were like 8 sleds internationally, something like that. The first, like now you have 20, whatever, really good, talented women bobsled drivers. When the sport was just starting, they tried their hardest to groom the track. So instead of doing this through the Kreisel, you just sort of naturally did this, and it was smoother, and it just the track naturally pointed you down the hill. When I started, the first time the World Cup circuit, which didn't include women's bobsleigh, it wasn't joined with skeleton like it is now. I watched 3 different individuals get taken off in an ambulance launching out of the Kreisel in Altenburg before Paul, my teammate, and I said, "Is this doing you any good to watch this?" "Nope." "Okay, let's go." So it's changed. And I can think of in 2004, the World Championships in 2004. After the first day, I was tied to the 100th for 3rd place. After the 3rd run, I was tied with someone else in 2nd place. And then because we were all like this, there was a flip at the end. In my first World Cup ever, I was in 10th place. I was tied to the 100th in 10th place. Someone else was 100th ahead of that. So 9th was a certain time. 10th and 11th were 100th behind that. 12th was another 100th behind that. So there are many examples that I can give you where you could be in 14th place or you're in 7th place, but you're only 800ths ahead of 14th. So in essence, don't think of yourself, well, I'm in 7th, I hope I end in 7th. You're in a 7-way tie for 7th.
Yeah.
And there's a lot, and 6th is a long shot, but 15th could happen no problem.
I'm saying all these judge-based sports are, Colin, I know you love your moguls. I'm not here to shit on moguls. I love moguls too. But seriously, like, just stick to the timing. It's more interesting. That way we know you've got to make up 300ths of a second and not be judged. Like, imagine if, Duff, you're being judged for your technique on turn 7. You're like, oh, fuck that. I just want to go fast. All right? Yeah. That's what we want, right? Speed. I
give a poor impression of my effort, apparently. So I don't want anyone judging me. At that same Torino Olympics, actually, I went and watched aerials. And if you ever get the chance, maybe you have, to watch aerials from the bottom of the hill, you go up several stories, then there's a jump, then there's someone who launches themselves a couple of stories above that.
Yeah.
And this was my overall impression of it. It's like, here they go, spin, brrr, boom, land perfectly, and someone goes 4th.
Yeah. That's a great way of explaining it. That's the best way of explaining aerials I've ever heard. Yep.
You just did something. I personally know, or back in the day, I knew 3 people on the Canadian aerials team.
Mm-hmm.
And one had broken her neck before, and one had broken his back before, and the other guy hadn't. So 2 out of 3. And when you look at it, it's like, oh, you think I'm crazy because I'm a skeleton guy? Well, in a million years, I would not.
I love hearing that. I love hearing that. That's the thing, because I mean, to me, it's like the Winter Olympics. Every sport, with the exception of curling, I feel can kill you. And even curling would kill you if you laid in front of one of those damn rocks coming towards you, right? So like, whereas the Summer Olympics, like, I mean, again, I'm not disrespecting golf. Great sport. But I mean, to die in golf, you're going to have to be doing something pretty shit. If you die in dressage, you've pissed the horse off enough somewhere to kill you. I don't know. But whereas Winter Olympics, you're this close to death at every single turn. So that's why the Winter Olympics are better than the Summer Olympics. And I love the Summer Olympics. Duff, I wanted to touch on really quickly. You brought up sort of these other nations that, you know, it's great to see kind of doing well and maybe not these traditional ones. I stand by the fact that Australia's greatest ever medal win in Summer or Winter Olympics was Jackie Narracott winning silver in Beijing, because I don't think we have any business winning a medal in a sliding sport when the nearest track to Australia, I think, would be in Korea or China. So, I mean, when you see, like, based on what you're saying before, but when you see these other nations that aren't traditional, not necessarily sliding nations, but winter nations doing well, does that, do you feel, put the sport in a good stead in the future? Because we've also got, like, I can't remember her name, but the woman who got bronze in Beijing was Dutch, and I don't necessarily think of the Dutch as doing well in the sliding sports. They're more on the skating, but is the sport healthy, do you think, kind of growing outside of these traditional nations that we consider skeleton nations?
Yeah, well, it's you say there's no track in the Netherlands, but they're a stone's throw away from 5 tracks. And there's no reason, you know, you could probably argue that the Australian mentality, which I can get into what my impression of the Australian mentality, if you want to go there.
Always. I always like to hear about us. Come on.
Is probably well suited to the sliding sports. You just have to uproot and rent a place that's by a track. Simple as that. And back in the day, when Australia decided they were going to take a run at skeleton, and they decided, at the time, it was just women's skeleton. It was targeted by the AIS as being somewhere where there was potential medals to be won. I was involved. They hired Terry Holland, who is an American slider from my day and before my day, to be the head coach. But a lot of their training was done in Calgary because it was somewhere that you could live relatively inexpensively, and a relatively not an extreme track like our track now here in town is in the state of disrepair. It was torn up a little bit to modify, and then the funding was cut, and so there is no track in Calgary right now. And I wouldn't. We're paying a price for that because it's a great track to learn on. And Whistler, in my opinion, is a very demanding track, a very challenging track. There's value in that, but it's what you want. Why Calgary used to be so great is that after a certain period of time, you could just go down again and again and again and be relaxed and begin to feel the nuance of the changes in pressure, which is how the best people steer in response to. And it takes you a couple of years to get to, that's why I say it takes 5 years to be good as a driver. It's because your first whole year or anytime you're learning a new track, it's, that was my first run. And by corner 7, it always scared me when a new person said this, but they said it fairly regularly. I didn't know where I was. Oh my goodness. How could you do that and not know where you are?
Yeah.
You have to be able to go. And my advice to someone doing it for the first time would be to go to a not demanding track and take 200 runs and tell me what you feel in the middle of the Kreisel on run 200. And, you feel the pressure drop a little bit, 2/3 the way around. Okay, perfect. Now you know exactly where you are and how you should steer at that point in the corner, as opposed to what everyone does the first, which is I have a death grip on the sled and I'm, every muscle is tense and I'm looking as hard as I can to see when it's time to steer.
Me. Yeah, I'd be probably big pile of poo behind me. I'm probably on the way down the ice. But I'm glad you mentioned this straight, because there was a video on YouTube of you giving a speech at the Australian Institute of Sport. So I was going to ask sort of that connection to Australia. So how much time did you spend down here sort of with the program here?
I was only at the AIS for a couple of weeks.
Right.
It may have been a week and a half or something. It was like summer planning for the following season.
And was that in that was in Canberra? You got to visit our beautiful nation's capital? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Any thoughts on Canberra? This is a safe space, stuff. You can be honest.
I love the Australian system. I remember having there's a planning meeting and we're talking about wind tunnel testing. And someone said, what about, because what I thought they did very well was we got a cycling coach and we got a guy from this sport and we got a therapist and we got a nutritionist and they're all sitting on the same meeting. And the cycling guy said, what if you put some padding in this part would that help for the wind tunnel testing? Maybe we can gain an advantage. And I said, I appreciate the spirit that you're saying that, but that's not legal in the sport. And it was a completely innocent comment. I mean, he was saying, that's exactly why he was at that meeting. Bring to it what you've learned through your sport and your wind tunnel testing. And the director of the program said, okay, guys, I know that's what you meant by that, but just to be clear, if we were caught cheating, not only would it cut the funding to the program, it would be the end of the program. Okay, so none of us had any misgivings as to what the nature of Australian sport was. I wish there was more. I sound like I'm kissing ass now, but like
very well on this show, don't worry.
I remember having a conversation with that guy after saying I was really impressed by that there was no if, ands, or but. Like, this is our policy. And when I was having that conversation to him, the director of that program, I said, your policy on cheating. And he said, yeah, tell it walking. And it was I didn't know what he meant first. He meant, oh, you've got an excuse for why you were cheating. Well, you can, by all means, tell me what that is as you're leaving. Like, that's, love that. I love that.
I got to add, I do love the fact that when I ask you what you think about Canberra, you basically talked about it being a meeting. That's very Canberra. You go to Canberra for meetings. No one goes to Canberra for just visiting. So, I'm not shitting all over Canberra. Canberra's a nice city, but that's a very Canberra. Colin, I keep jumping in here.
Sites.
No, there's not much. There's a tower and a Parliament House. That's all you need to see. It's all good.
and some nice.
I do have to ask one more question about Turin because I think it's appropriate to talk about the end of your career, because that literally would be your last race. Now, unless I have my facts wrong, but did you know 100? A lot of athletes will say, you know what, I'm thinking this is gonna be my last Olympics, but then they're like, I'm gonna do the World Championships after this. I'm gonna make the decision as I go along, and they come back. Did you know 100% going into Torino that like this is it? And when you're doing that second run, it's like, if I win gold on this, it's like there couldn't be a better time because it'll literally be my last race ever.
Yeah, my body was telling me that it was time to retire, and I didn't think. It's interesting because I was 39 in Turin. That was a record. My uncle called me 6 months later and said, "Do you realize your name's in the Guinness Book of World Records?" And I was like, "Really? What? Tell me," because that's childhood dream, and it was for being the oldest guy to, there's
individual medalist
vision to it. Yeah, individual Winter Olympics.
A record you held for 8 years. I don't think it got broken until 2014. Yeah. So yeah,
and it was broken by an absolute legend of Olympic sport too. I lost my train of thought. Where were we? We were talking about me being.
Colin basically
just said,
you were old. You wanted to retire.
Literally last race, the best one.
Yeah, I thought if I won a medal, I'd be done, and if I didn't win a medal, I would stick around until the first World Cup race of the following year because it was in Calgary.
Home track. Was it tempting? Was it tempting though? Next Olympics, Vancouver. Like, was there just a little bit of a thought, like home Olympics, you could go for one more?
You see John and like, you know what? I could teach him a couple things.
You could be hosting the Amazing Race right now, Duff, as a 2-time gold medalist.
Could I have, as you get, this is what I have learned. The older you get, it's not that you get weaker. It's not that you just sort of naturally go like this. Every year I prepared for a fall, I was going to be better than I was the year before. And then I got injured. And then my recuperation wasn't as quick as you hope. So, short of taking drugs or something, it wasn't going to be in the cards. And I was happy to not be involved anywhere anymore, not be away from the kids as much. I didn't have kids in Torino, but, that was sort of where I was going. And I did coach after that, but I always had it in my contract that I would never be away from home longer than 3 weeks at a time. So,
oh, wow. That's a good way of doing it there. A couple of things to touch on. We've got our questions to close out with, but I mentioned that video I saw of you talking to the AAS. You tell a great story about a photo that was taken of you when you won the gold. Now, I'd love for you to explain this because you sort of got your hand out. Looks like you're celebrating, but there's something a little bit more to this story about why you're holding your hand up basically once you won that gold medal.
Well, the idea is that when you cross the finish line, there's no scoreboard right there for the slider. So you're watching on TV, you've got all this technical data, you've got a light that changes from red to green or vice versa, the instant that you take the lead or fall out of the lead. There's giant scoreboards at the venue. Everyone knows exactly what the results are instantly as they happen. The only person who doesn't is the person in the track. And at the time, and I've given that presentation of discussing that. And I always say at that moment, I was very happy to have, 10 or 20 seconds maybe of not knowing what the result was, because sometimes it's not enough. And you can be perfect and someone was just a little bit faster. And so I thought I had broken a rib 3 weeks prior to that. It turned out I hadn't. I had one of the best races of my career, and I didn't know if it was good enough to win, but I needed a moment to be thankful that I had perhaps two of the best four. If you took the four best runs of my career, two of them were my last two. And if it wasn't good enough to win, I was happy to have that moment to think I did what any athlete would dream of doing, which would be at your best when it mattered the most. So then, good, I had that moment. Now I'm looking for signs as to where I ended up. I knew I would be in the medals based on the gap to fourth from the first run and how good the second run was. But I didn't know if it was first or second. And at the top, before I went, Jeff's time was like a third of a second faster than anybody else. So I didn't like that. I remember thinking before I went, oh, that's fast. So because your teammates, your competitors, your coaches, they know you don't know, it's very common if you're in first place for someone to lean into the track and hold up a number one. And no one was doing that for me. And that's a bad sign, because if you're not, the worse you did, the less, people don't want to give you the bad news, right? So
you're not going like this.
Well, no. There is none of this. There's none of this. That's what that looks like.
Oh, gee, I missed him. Oh.
Yeah. So I'm thinking that's a bad sign. But then someone leaned into the track to give me a high five. I'm already up on my elbows, catching air and slowing down. So I go, yes, that's a good sign. I enthusiastically participate. And someone sent me a picture. I think the Edmonton Sun, that photo was taken and was on the Edmonton Sun, and the headline, I think, was Canada goes 1-2-4 in skeleton or something very triumphant. But the person I thought was trying to give me a high five actually had a little disposable camera that they stuck out there, went click, and then pulled it out of the way before I got there. So basically,
you were left hanging.
At the pinnacle of my athletic career, someone gave me one of these.
I love that. That person, if they're listening or watching right now, we need to organize on the 20th anniversary you to finally land the high five.
No, I need to commission somebody to make a painting so I can put it right there under my John painting, because that's the victory pose there. I want the one hand victory pose on a painting.
Just you need to get that underneath, because there's a big gap underneath John there, ready for Duff to go. Like, what are you talking about? Speaking of
I was telling Hallie, I'm like, I got space there, but you know what, Duff, we can get yours made first. You're already there.
Speaking of pictures, Duff, another thing that I read, now I don't know if this is true or not, I read that your one of your poses from your gold medal victory in 2006 was used as a pictogram for the Vancouver Olympics. Is that true? Are you aware of that?
Well, that's right. Hold on a second.
Oh, show and tell.
Oh,
here we go.
Yes.
Our audio listeners right now, you got to watch the video, and we've got show and tell going on right now.
Okay, let's see if I can angle this correctly.
So wow, there you go.
There.
That's actual official. That's amazing.
Poster.
Fantastic. What's that? That must be pretty cool then, that you're using publicity for the next Olympic Games.
Well, yeah, I'm so vain. I got it framed and put up in my office. So
you should see what happens if I ever made the Olympics. Come on now.
I actually, it's funny you mentioned that I'm so vain, because one thing I wanted to ask you about is you said you were okay with leaving the sport behind and everything, but after that, you said a couple times now you went into coaching. More interesting than that, you wrote a book, but it's not your typical sports book. And it's funny because it wasn't until before I did this interview where I was sort of looking it up. I'm like, wait a second, I remember when this came out, and I remember seeing it. I left my mind and didn't pick up a copy. I'm definitely going to pick up a copy now. But you wrote a book which is totally not a vanity project. Essentially, you wrote a book talking to other athletes as more or less, I'm guessing, coaching, psychology for other athletes. I mean, how did that come about? I mean, and that has to be the most commendable thing of all time. A famous, legendary athlete is going to put out a book, and it's not really even going to be about yourself.
Well, I'm going to, I don't know, if get a recording of this where someone call me legendary, that you're excited.
All of this is yours to use, my friend. You do whatever that you want.
Thank you, but I didn't want to go through the humility of writing a tell-all book and have not a single person buy it. So yeah, well, I didn't have, well, I write about skeleton. I sent a few copies to Jesse Lumsden, is an Olympic, a CFL Hall of Famer, and a veteran of a few Olympics in bobsleigh, who's now running the Canadian team. I sent a few copies to him because there's so many bobsled stories. There's so many skeleton stories. You know, just the story of us walking through the farmer's field and hopping a fence to start brainstorming. Does that take any special talent or skill to do that? No, it absolutely doesn't. So I don't know, you know, as a coach, I found that very difficult to inspire the athletes to do that. But that's homework. You have, here's the kind of athlete that you want to coach and the kind of athlete that you don't want to coach. The kind of athlete you don't want to coach is the one that you have to motivate. The kind of athlete that you love to coach is the one where you say, here's a book, here's a novel that has nothing to do with skeleton, because you're going to drive yourself crazy. Go forget about it for 15 minutes. That's the team that I was on. And 2 years before Torino, my youngest sister, bought me a DVD set of season 2 of Scrubs. Now, have you ever heard of the show?
Yeah.
Oh, I used to watch it all the time.
Yep.
Okay. I had never heard of the show, let alone had not watched season 1. And my sister gave me as a gift season 2. And it was the best thing for us.
Why season 2? Sorry to interrupt. Why did she start at season 2? Come on,
He
sis.
said it was better than season 1.
All right, okay.
Fair.
Touche.
But I don't have to tell you, but for listeners who've never heard of it, it's just this really goofy, silly half-hour comedy. So without commercials, 22 minutes. So for 22
it's coming back
minutes,
too.
Yeah.
For 22 minutes each night, we would forget about skeleton because we were slowly going crazy thinking about it. You know, I'd say for every waking moment, but we probably dreamt about it also. So all day long and half of the night, we were thinking about corners and how to get down slightly faster. And so there's no surprise as to why we were as successful as we were, in my opinion.
Good to know. You wrote a book and John got a TV show out of it. So what did you ever get the call up to be Amazing Race host? Like where was your chance of hosting the Amazing? Why does John get a gold medal? You were the first. You should be getting a TV
Melissa
show.
was a contestant on it.
Yeah.
So he can put she was on a season. So maybe you and Jeff or you and Paul can be a team on the next season.
Yeah, I feel you're robbed here.
Well, if you've ever seen John give a presentation, he's extremely charismatic. So it doesn't surprise me at all that he's not just a show of one thing, but he's sort of parlayed that into being a TV personality or whatever the terminology is.
Blank space next to you, Colin. It's dying for a picture of Duff there. Colin, I want you to ask you a Peter Gabriel question, but I've just got a couple of quick ones. Ones we always ask Duff in terms of our medalists on this show. What do you do with the medal? Is it on display? Is it in a sock drawer? Kind of like what does the medal do 20 years later after winning the gold in Turin?
It is in a sock drawer.
Yeah, okay.
That's the most common answer.
It's a popular spot for Olympic medals. It's the sock drawer.
Yeah.
So, just we always like to ask that. I've also got to touch on two quick things. First of all, you're a Calgary man. Please tell me you're a Flame supporter.
Sure.
Said with confidence of how Calgary are doing this year, or just not a fan in general, or?
Well, I'm afraid it doesn't work that way. I grew up in Toronto, so
you're a Colin. You're with Colin. He's a Leafs guy. So
I'm from Winnipeg, and I'm a Leafs fan.
Yeah.
Really? Is that because your dad typically? Is that why?
No,
that is?
it was. I think it was. The Leafs had really great years, but then the Jets were gone. So who you going to root for?
Right.
Well, Toronto became my team. So I followed Toronto longer than, we've had at least the New Jets. So that's it for me.
And being Australian, we just generally I picked a Canadian and an American team. I picked the Flames because I loved Cool Runnings and I love Bret the Hitman Hart. So, I mean, it just was Calgary. It kind of, it worked well. And I went for the Ducks for America because I watched the Mighty Ducks as a kid. Can I also ask, I want to ask about your name. Where is Duff from? Because we got very excited recently when we did our skeleton episode and we were going over the history of it. And to me, your name is like one of the greatest names I've ever come across when it comes to Olympic athletes. Like, is Duff from a certain country? Like, is there a background behind the name Duff?
It's Scottish. It was my mother's maiden name.
Wow. Okay. Great.
Yeah. So my first name is my mother's maiden name. My middle name is my dad's mom's maiden name.
Fantastic.
And Gibson.
Great.
Yeah.
So do you often get sick of Simpsons references and the beer reference? Like, is it just like the bane of your life since the Simpsons came about?
No, but it doesn't bother me too much. I've used it to my advantage before. Sorry, what's your name, Jeff? No, what's your name?
Yeah.
It's Duff, like the beer on The Simpsons.
Duff Man. Duff Man. Come on.
They will never forget it. I'll forget yours, but you'll never forget.
Oh, it's a legendary name.
Perfect segue here, because before we get to Peter Gabriel, which anybody who's watching YouTube, I'm hoping you spotted what I spotted this entire time. But on the topic of names, is it true that you have a son named Getty Gibson? And I'm going to assume named after Geddy Lee, the famous Canadian from Rush?
No,
Really?
No, but there was a we saw that as karma. My wife and I adopted our two sons from Ethiopia in 2008. And one of our sons we renamed, but one was born Gideon.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, well, Gideon, probably go by Geddy.
That's a great name.
Thought that was such a positive, Canadian vibe. So
you just
it's meant to be.
Wow. Family tradition of amazing names. Just everyone in your family seems to be just born for greatness.
And like, if there's anything that tops Duff Gibson, it's Geddy Gibson.
Yeah.
Like, you're meant for greatness with a name
I'm
like Geddy
listening
Gibson.
to Geddy. He can be prime minister. He can be whatever. He can be my mailman. I'm going to listen to him more. Like, seriously, that's
he can take over as the
name.
drummer of Rush. I mean, they got a new drummer out there. Does he know how to drum?
No,
not yet.
Second, I brought this up before we even started recording, and you said you had a story. So maybe my favorite artist of all time is Peter Gabriel, and I spotted the album cover of So right behind you there. Probably his most famous album, maybe his best album. I saw Peter Gabriel in concert a few years ago. I literally flew out to Ottawa for 24 hours or 36 hours just so I could see Peter Gabriel and come back. You said you had a Peter Gabriel story. You're a fan of Peter Gabriel, I'm guessing?
Well, yeah, it says something like, "Hey Duff, congrats on the medal," or something like that.
Wow.
Is what it says, but it's, and I've never met him, but I have this super prolific aunt who has lived in New York City and London, and she's in Washington, D.C. now. When she lived in London, she was part of an organization called Human Rights Watch, and their main thing is in London. And she organized once an evening with former Nobel Prize winner Jimmy Carter.
Huh.
And she was very so proud of it and describing it all, and sent pictures, and it's like, here's me with Jimmy Carter. And it was this, I don't remember who it was. I don't know if the name stuck with me, but a very famous journalist in London was interviewing Jimmy Carter, and here's these photos, and here's Peter Gabriel and I giving him a cake at the end of it. And I'm like, okay, stop. Are you telling me, like, not that I'm not interested in anything you've said to this point, but are you telling me you know Peter Gabriel? And she said, yes. Okay, wait. Are you, how well do you know? Like, okay, let's say you have your phone. is it possible for you to dial certain numbers and Peter Gabriel will answer on the other end of your phone? And she said yes, basically. And it was like, oh my God, that's that's great about the
Cool about the president, the former president of the United States. Good for him, but
yeah,
Nobel Peace Prize. That's great, but you can punch a button on your phone and Peter Gabriel will answer the question. So for, I don't know, Christmas or that just showed up in the mail at one point because I was so impressed that she knew Peter Gabriel.
There you go. Colin, you now know someone. You now know someone who knows someone who knows Peter.
Who knows Peter Gabriel. But you know what we got to do, Ben? We got to make this complete, okay? So I'm saying we need to, at some point, whenever we can track them down, we need to get a signed DVD copy of Scrubs season 1 by the cast, and we need to send us. Congrats on the medal, Duff.
Next time I'm chilling with Zach Braff, I'll be sure to get it signed. I mean, I'm due to catch up with him soon.
And then you can finally watch season 1.
And I would happily put that right up beside Peter Gabriel.
Next to there. What a fantastic story. Wow. There you go. I love this. You see things in the background. That's why we get Colin on. Colin doesn't do these much with me anymore, but, there's a reason why we do that.
Only when there's legends.
Only when there's legends on the show. And I will say that the last 2 Canadian gold medalists we've had on now have talked about musicians. But do you know how to pronounce Peter Gabriel? Because as we discovered, Alex Bilodeau doesn't know how to pronounce Michael Bublé. So,
yeah. If you ever give him an award, you can't butcher the name.
If you ever have to give Peter Gabriel an award, make sure you know how to pronounce his name. Don't pull a Bilodeau, as I think we now call that. Duff, we like to wrap up. 10 get to know you style questions. As I said, I think to you off air, hopefully maybe a couple of these you've never answered in your career before. I'll start with the one thing that you never left home without when traveling to a competition. And you're not allowed to say your sled because obviously you need that skeleton. So that you're not allowed to answer that.
This will be a visual. Are you?
Yes.
This is terrible podcast.
That's all right.
We have a YouTube channel.
We have both.
This is great incentive. This is incentive to get people to
if you don't like staring at Colin in my face forever, this is the reason why, because you got to stare at this. Look at Peter Gabriel. There he is.
There's a close up of the Peter Gabriel autograph.
I'm looking all beautiful there. All right.
The brush with greatness story that never actually involved meeting the person.
It counts.
But this was my lucky charm for.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. My wife Jen gave that to me. I don't know before or after Salt Lake, but it was always in my pocket every time I flew. And it was something that is, I don't know, there's a tinge. It says believe, as you can read,
mm-hmm.
But it's discolored now a little bit because of I just rub it between my fingers in my pocket for.
Is it a rock? Is it a stone with just word believes? Yeah. Is that what it is? Yeah. Okay. Great.
Yeah. Just fantastic. For safe travels kind of a thing.
Can you put it in the suit or is that illegal? Like to have extra, like that would be considered illegal if it's in the suit.
I guess it depends where you put it because you don't want it in certain spots if you're going through a 6G corner.
Yeah, true. I'm just thinking I hate to bring up Cool Runnings in the sliding sport, but I mean like Lucky Egg, like how Senka's got the Lucky Egg in his suit, you've got the Lucky Stone, so
that was fiction, Ben, but
it's true to me, Duff. Don't take away my dreams. Don't take away my Senka Lucky Egg.
Are you mentioning Cool Runnings because you read that I was an extra in Cool Runnings?
You were an extra in Cool Runnings?
Is this true?
This is.
I will pretend I read that, and that will be my next question. So, Duff, I read you were an extra in Cool Runnings. Tell us about that experience.
I was an Austrian bobsledder.
Wow!
Which you never saw my face. Well, and if you could drive a bobsleigh, then you. It was a great gig because you were paid as skilled help. So,
so you were the driver in the Austrian sled, were you?
Yeah, but I don't know that I can. There are moments when the Jamaicans are about to crash.
Yep.
And John Kennedy was at the starting line.
Yep.
I'm wearing, I think, a yellow suit and a helmet, and I can point myself out, but no one else could.
Well, I'm
figure out
due to
who they
rewatch it. We're recording this just before Christmas, and it's one of my lists of movies to watch this week. So I'm gonna like look extra carefully now.
Okay, then I will tell you, I was also an extra as a speed skater. So there is a Olympic oval scene. I feel like
You're blowing my mind enough. I feel like we need to just scrap the last hour and a half and talk about your extra roles in Cool Runnings, all right? Like, I was told off recently by a bobsledder, stop mentioning Cool Runnings, we get it. Now, fuck that guy. I'm bringing up every single interview because we get shit like this. So keep going. Sorry.
Yes, so there's an oval scene.
Yep.
And it's like the camera is way back from the rafters of the oval, and way down the ice, there are maybe 5 speed skaters who start as if they were in a race, and then they synchronized and get into a line. And you'll notice that there's one speed skater who's just slightly out of time. So as the line doesn't go perfectly like this, the line sort of goes, as it goes out here, then you see there's one guy who comes out a little bit, and you can see them on this side. There's one guy who comes out. That's me.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay.
That's me. Thank you very much.
Cool.
Yes.
All right. Sorry, Chris, no disrespect. I didn't mean to tell you what I just told you. I apologize for bringing up Cool Runnings every time I talk to a bobsledder. Duffy's a skeleton athlete, so therefore I'm allowed to bring it up, and this is why we bring it up, because
he's also a Hollywood star.
He's a Hollywood
So
star.
it's appropriate.
All right. I've interviewed one of the original 4 Jamaican bobsledders, but, I didn't get a story as cool as this. So
yeah, exactly.
Well, and I am a former bobsledder, and I competed against the original guys.
There you go.
Back in the day.
Look, yeah. Colin, good luck with question 2. I got the best answer of this interview. Sorry, you lose.
Question 2. I mean, no pressure, Duff, but we have some at the top here. What's a tradition or superstition you follow before every big competition?
Well, this is not going to be as exciting an answer as the.
Nothing can. No, you peaked.
I had a bunch of annoying little pointless rituals, like doing up my left shoe, then my right shoe, put on my left sock before I put on my right sock, little things like that. I didn't. So much of our sport is, like you get 6 training runs and then a race, then a World Cup race. So you get 6 minutes of actual practice. So how do you make up for that? How do you get 10,000 hours if you're doing it 6 minutes at a time? You visualize, you mentally rehearse. And so much of what I did was the mental rehearsal, to the point where I needed season 2 of Scrubs to give my brain a break after a while. But yeah, I've come across, a couple of athletes. Leanne Parsley of the United States said the same thing. Before her Olympics in Salt Lake, her one and only Olympics in Salt Lake, how much visualization did you do? How much mental rehearsal did you do? Hours and hours and hours every day, to the point where it almost drove me crazy, and I almost jumped off a bridge.
Wow.
But that's the non-glamorous answer to that.
That's why Zach Braff creates Olympic gold medals, basically. Season 2 of I'm going to watch season 2 of Scrubs now. Maybe it'll make this podcast better.
Watch all of them.
Yeah, exactly. What's a song that, was on every one of your pre-competition playlists, no matter what? It was a pump up. Or maybe Peter Gabriel, was he sort of the song that was pumping you up? Bit of Sledgehammer or something?
I was famously not listening to music before I went. I was listening to my body. That sounds like a very nerdy thing to say. I don't know how many people would tell you the same thing. I discuss that in my book. When I'm preparing, I'm physically going through exactly how I want to feel. In skeleton and in luge, and I think bobsled, they don't do this, and they would benefit tremendously from doing this, but it's not heard of in those sports. You are the shock absorber. And that's why you see in luge, you see in some cases very plump body types. in the men and the women. Very muscular, but your body is the shock absorber. The more relaxed you can be, and therefore you have to mentally rehearse being relaxed. So again, did I mention that my aunt knows Peter Gabriel? Like,
you don't need to listen to music.
I was wondering if, like, at any point is your body sounding similar to Shock the Monkey or something like that?
There was one song that my father passed away a month and a half before the Torino Olympics. And there was a song that I could probably look up on my phone that refers to a maple leaf, and I can't remember it, but whenever it comes on my playlist, it reminds me of my dad. Mm-hmm. And I remember being in Torino, and when you're in Europe, there are some songs that are the same and some that are, you're in places where there's no English anything.
Yeah.
And that when we were going to the track in Torino for official training, that song came on the radio, and it was like, that is a sign from my dad.
Yeah.
I could figure out what it is, but
it's those special moments though. Like, it's sort of just kind of having that, and zeroed in
so
there.
it was never a song on my playlist, but yeah, I was always preparing mentally, and I didn't want a song interfering with how I needed to feel.
Pick up on that, Hilding. You can hear it, Paul. You do it well.
Well, so next one.
That's not what you were hoping for. I feel like
I think it's better. I think it's better, to be honest.
You literally gave maybe one of the best answers we've ever had on this podcast. It steered into you being an extra and cool runnings. I'm not expecting anything now because I don't think that can be topped. So, just...
I mean, to be honest,
edited it to be over by now, hey?
Hey, no, nothing's getting edited now. This is going gold.
To be honest, I think that's almost a better answer. It's like, what is the song you associate with your victory? Because not everybody some people listen to a song just to pump them up, and then they come in 10th place. No offense to Salt Lake
Colin
City,
was on an episode with me ages ago, Duff, and basically, long story short, Meatloaf came up. The guest was so young, she didn't even know who Meatloaf was. So there was this awkward moment where basically I'm like, what's your favorite Meatloaf song? So for about 5 minutes, that was a joke, died along death. But, like, at least now I can look at you and say, who's Meatloaf? You're going to know who that is. But, like, this is not as awkward as that. So it's fine. It's all good. What is your favorite Meatloaf song, by the way? Do you have a favorite Meatloaf song? Bring it back, Colin.
I've said this to someone at work. I said, "Oh, look how cool you are. You're like the Fonz." And he went, huh? And then I said, "You don't know who the Fonz is, do you?"
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know who that is. Oh my God.
Get into the age where you're going to mention a Scrubs character and they're going to be like, who?
we get the point in this show now, Duff, where we used to ask a question, what was the first Olympics you remember watching? I mean, you brought up Montreal, but people would be like, oh, I think I vaguely remember watching Rio. And I'm like, oh, shut up.
Literally had people who are like, so probably Sochi.
I was very young for London, but I kind of remember it. Like, yep. Okay.
This one, I'm curious to see if you have one, and if it was from Ben, maybe. What is the most unexpected or funny DM you've ever gotten as an Olympian?
Oh, well,
this was pretty random asking you on this show, Duff. Let's be honest.
I've never got a random DM.
Until now. Did you used to get, did they have because I know in Australia, for example, sort of in the early 2000s, they would do what was called a herogram. So you could send in a letter or I think ring up a 0055 number to our phone company and they would pass it on to the Olympians. Did the Canadian Olympic Committee sort of do
Sobeys does that now. We kind of we submitted our own, but I don't think they were doing it then.
No, I don't think so. Well, it's like Torino's 20 years ago. We're a few months short of 20 years ago. They gave cash prizes for medals in the year after, starting in Vancouver. It's a lot of stuff.
So you owe money. They owe you money. Come on now.
I joined social media in in 2008 or something, Facebook in 2008.
Good days
So
before social media. Don't we remember those? The good old days.
I've gone back. I've
Oh,
deleted my Twitter account, and I would highly recommend doing that.
if unfortunately we didn't have to get this show out, that we would just,
Promotion.
stupid promotion. People should just listen to this show, all right? That's how they should do it. The weirdest thing you ever ate at an international competition, Duff, and did you like it?
Well, in France, I loved the roast until I heard that it was horse meat.
Oh.
And then
Okay.
that was very common, and that and quite honestly, I didn't realize it wasn't beef until someone told me.
Did you ever try horse milk? Because we had a wrestler on this show who I think went to one of the stands. I can't remember which one. And he said it was like very traditional for them to drink horse milk. And it was like fizzy. And it was really weird. And he said it was disgusting. So, yeah.
No. But I've always frog's legs. I think I had frog's legs on that same, because it was the Albertville track from the Albertville. So we've competed in France a couple of times.
Okay.
And I think we tried frog's legs then and found out after the fact it was horse meat. But
I can't say I had a roast when I was in Paris, so I think I'm safe there. I never came across frog's legs. I did escargot. I mean, I'd had escargot in Montreal, so I mean, I'd had it before.
Oh, yeah,
but
they serve it here.
I didn't come across frog's legs, which I was disappointed when I was in Paris, but next time. Anyway.
The flip side of this is, what's your ultimate guilty pleasure meal after a big competition? What's your personal go-to meal?
I should have had answers for this planned ahead, because
you did listen, right? You did hear these. I feel
person trying to answer these questions now. I don't really. Pizza. I go back to pizza.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Dairy Queen, something that I've avoided up until
during training.
And now you can eat whatever you wanted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of thing.
Dairy Queen was forever ruined for me after, who was it? Baylor on Survivor, wasn't it, Colin? That I'd never even heard of.
Oh, yeah.
Dairy Queen. And then when I lived in Canada, I'm like, hey, it's that place that Survivor contestant mentioned in that song that one time. If you could, I mean, you did so many different sports stuff, so you've got a handful to pick from here. But if you could swap sports for a day with another Olympian, what event would you choose, and how do you think you'd fare?
Well, my motivation from day one was just to be a part of the Olympics. And then when I made it, I thought, it's not to be a part of it. It's to try and win. So I had dreams, actually. You mentioned, Colin, that the truth that my last time on a sled was the Torino Olympics. And I can remember being in Altenburg as a coach the following year, or maybe the World Championships, maybe it was 2 years after, because that's where the Worlds were, and thinking, should I just hop on the sled one more time? Because it's like, here's what you need to do for corner 4. And this seems counterintuitive. It's like, well, I don't know. It's like, I was freaking the Olympic champion, 14 months ago, and you don't want to listen to my input. I thought, I should just jump on a sled one more time.
Fucking John Montgomery, listen to him.
He would listen. It was the person who wasn't that good who would second guess, which was the frustrating thing. But then I had dreams that I tried to make a comeback, and I finished in the 20s, and it was a nightmare. I was thinking, why did you do that? You went out on top. Why did you try and make a comeback? So I did the smart thing, and I never did try and get on a sled again. But what would I like to do? Well, there are so many other sports that are so much more fun, I would say, than skeleton. I would never, like the aerials, no way. I would never try that. No, but if I could magically transport myself, I'd probably switch with an NHL player so I could be a millionaire. Or
and you'd get to play in the Olympics again because they're coming back. So
yeah,
finally,
yeah.
Cool. That's
I sort of go back and forth. Like, do you want the dream team? I thought this with the dream team. Do you want them hogging all of the press when there's someone who's played badminton in obscurity their whole life. They got one shot to be in front of the camera for 15 minutes. And, but no, we're going to interview the multi millionaires but then do you want, now I think this way of hockey, you want the best against the best.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why have the sport?
Well, one thing I'll add on that, just on the hockey side of it, one thing I've really appreciated with the promo from the Canadian side of things is that Sidney Crosby has been very front and center of this. And I think that's what I think different about hockey to basketball when you mentioned Dream Team, because it was like LeBron and Kevin Durant, like, yeah, it's just, another thing. Whereas I feel the hockey players genuinely want to be there. Like, for, Connor McDavid, who's never played at an Olympics, has he? So like, for this, it's kind of that shot. Whereas Sid, the kid, it's what, he's going to be his fourth Olympics, isn't it? Third, because he wasn't in 2018 and 2022. Yeah. I don't know, Colin. You can step in on that one, but I'm just waiting for my jersey to arrive so that when I'm in Milan, I'm wearing my Sidney Crosby jersey in the crowd. So,
This is probably the toughest question we have, but if your Olympic journey were a movie, what would the title be and who would play you?
I've got some help here for you. If
you did write a book. I mean, it's not 100% just, the Duff Gibson story, but you could even borrow that.
Gee, we used to, like, I'm prematurely gray. So we used to make references to, he was the handsomest man in the world a couple of years, the famous for being gray haired early, Matt Damon's buddy.
Oh, Ben Affleck?
Ben Affleck or?
No.
George Clooney.
George Clooney.
Clooney.
Yeah.
Yeah. But now I try not to have hair at all.
Now you say that. Like so we go to ChatGPT and they give us some advice and what they, but I actually, and I'm not just saying this to suck up, because you said before you're being a suck up, I'm a suck up on this interview. If you put some hair on you, I could see a bit of Clooney. I could see it in the face, so I
not with the face he's making now, which looks appalled to Ben's idea.
I feel like this is a trick, and this will be the social media clip where it says you actually kind of look like George Clooney, and I go, yeah, hey, you're right, and then that's the joke.
And then your wife sees
we play it backwards, where you're like the handsomest man alive.
you mentioned you were in Cool Runnings. You know what the clip is going to be for this episode, all right? You could literally right now tell me that you are like married to Natalie Portman, and that still would not top this list. So the ChatGPT have suggested Joel Edgerton, an Australian actor. Why not? Yeah. Jason Clarke, Ben Foster, Lee Schreiber, Dominic West, Boyd Holbrook, don't know who that is. Michael Shannon, yeah. Aaron Eckhart.
Oh, Michael Shannon.
Carl Urban and Josh Brolin as potential actors who could play you.
Josh Brolin, I see. That one I really see.
Yeah, that's not a bad one.
You know what? You just reminded me that someone told me that there is an actor that I look like, and I have no idea. I forgot what his name is, but he was in this is
Scrubs
terrible
season 2,
where I'll send it because I don't remember the guy's name, but he's always a bad guy. Okay. And he was, not
Jason Statham, maybe?
No, much bigger guy. Like he fought The Rock in Stand Tall.
Oh, that's a you question,
Oh,
Colin.
Walking Tall? Hold on.
That's a Colin question.
Yeah, look it up.
My rock knowledge stops at
Neil McDonough.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah. I really see that.
Okay. Yeah. He's what was he in recently? He was in, I know him from Desperate Housewives and that stupid show, was it Medical Investigation? He was in an episode of Third Watch.
He's on
Tulsa King.
Yeah.
Tulsa King with Stallone, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's a good one. Okay.
Yeah, we nailed it.
That's
Neil
what
McDonough.
Someone told me. So he said, yeah, that guy would play you in the movie of You. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we actually, so we get ChatGPT to suggest some movie titles, and they're pretty shit, these ones. I went with number 10. They went with Never Too Late, which, leans into kind of what happened. We can change it if you want. But we like to do a mock movie poster, thanks to ChatGPT. And again, our audio listeners, please go to our video version right now. So this is what it looks like here. Never Too Late. Achieve greatness at any age. There you are. Maple leafs everywhere. It's like under lights, there's a torch in the background. This I just want to point out this guy in the background here. He is very happy to see you win gold. Look at him. He is loving life.
And you know what? Duff Gibson played that extra in the background. That's what most people don't know.
I mean, I don't know how we're looking this picture there, Duff, but you know, it's that's ChatGPT for you, I guess.
Yeah, that's horrible. I'm glad I never.
You were in a movie. You were in Cool Runnings. Now we need to completely redo twice. You were that good. You know, see Neil McDonough playing two characters in a movie.
It was the slightly out of time speed skater, so you can see me.
Hey, at least you can be seen. That is the main thing. Two more for you, Duff. What is the one we've probably already asked it about 20 times in this interview, but the one question you're tired of being asked, and what is the one that you wish people would ask you instead?
What was the Olympics like?
Okay. We didn't ask that one today, Colin. Yeah, look at us go.
We did not ask that.
Ooh.
Yeah, what was it like? It was great. There's no good answer to that question. That's the problem.
Very rare you're going to say it was shit. I mean, some have said on this show that wasn't their favorite event they competed in, but they're not going to say it was shit.
It was no Cool Runnings. It wasn't like not meeting Peter Gabriel, but that my aunt knew Peter Gabriel.
You're this close to John Candy and this close to Peter Gabriel. Is there one that you wish people would ask you instead, like something that you'd like to talk about more, besides being in Cool Runnings, of course?
Well, I quite enjoyed this one because of the technical aspects of it. I find, when you have if I give a presentation and people, it's I'm sick of telling the same stories. It's the questions that you get that are more technical in nature. Sometimes, if you're speaking to a group of engineers or something, they'll ask some really insightful questions on, like the temperature of runners. Why is that? Something that's really off the beaten path. And I appreciate that just because it's a little different. We certainly touched on a number of stories that I wouldn't share regularly in other places today. So
you blew my mind. As I said at the beginning, those technical aspects, it's not something that we've had discussed too much on the show. I mean, admittedly, we haven't had many skeleton athletes on the show. I think you're our fourth off the top of my head. Fourth?
Fourth. Oh, no, because,
we had Nick on, our Aussie skeleton, a couple of times. We've had John on. You had Hallie on recently. And I think we had one way back in the day. I can't remember. Anyway, you're stretching my memory here with that because I forget. Duff, I'm going to forget you in 5 minutes anyway. We interviewed too many people on the show, apparently. So. I'm never going to forget you, Duff. You're in Cool Runnings. You're up here with a bullet. You're going to replace one of these paintings at one point. Trust me.
This last one, I think you already kind of gave us an answer earlier, although maybe there is a different one that will actually top what you mentioned about Salt Lake. But what's one lesson you've learned from losing that you think has shaped you more than winning?
Yeah, well, that was the Salt Lake one. It was that I wasn't doing half of what I could be doing on the technical side. Learned that through failure. That I didn't want to be an Olympian. I didn't want to be a participant. That was really a kind of a depressing thing. I would say my path to becoming an Olympian was thinking this is it in the 5 different sports that I dedicated myself to, and being wrong 4 times, that there is a genetic component to sport that you can't avoid. If you play basketball, it helps to be tall. You can't change that. And yes, maybe there is, a Spud Webb who can win the dunk contest at 5'7", but he would have been better if he was 5'11" or 6'5", or there are genetic realities when you're talking about sport. What's his name? David Epstein wrote a whole book about that called The Sports Gene, which is so absolutely fascinating. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't, you're who you are, but it's a fascinating book about the reality of genetics. And what I say, and here's another tie-in for Paul Bohm. When I talk about genetics in sport, in the Tao of Sport, my book, I use Paul as an example. If you were ever in a snowball fight against Paul, you would think, holy shit, that guy has a strong arm. And he has never thrown the javelin. He has never played baseball. He has never done discus. And at the Calgary Stampede, which is the big summer fair that they have here in Calgary each summer, he walked up cold to a little booth where you could throw a baseball, and they had a radar gun, and it was like 85 miles an hour or something. Cold, never having played before, never having warmed up or thrown, having been shown any technique. And a baseball weighs nothing compared to a well-packed snowball. So that guy, obviously, if someone showed him some technique, or he trained for a week or warmed up, would be throwing at, because major league pitchers they throw in the 90s. So you're born certain ways. It has to do, for pitching, it has to do with the structure of your shoulder and elbow. And there's nothing you can do about that. You can train and train and train. But for speed skate, for all the sports that I did, I ultimately was successful in skeleton because it required what I was suited for and didn't involve what I wasn't suited for, at least to some extent.
And those who are not genetically gifted in sports host podcasts. And that's where we are. So we'll take that. Duff, mate, this has been an absolute delight just to hear everything, not just the cool running stuff, mate. That was a joy, but like everything about your journey and just your career, and just so many great stories that we very much appreciate your time on the show. I mean, you said you're not really on social media anymore. I found you on social media. You don't have to share it if you don't want to, but I mean, is there anywhere that people, if it's maybe not social media, buy your book, anything you're doing right now that you want to plug, or anything along those lines that people can sort of continue on learning about you and your journey?
Well, yeah, if I am on, I just got rid of Twitter because I found that you couldn't prevent the crazy conspiracy theories or whatever. You couldn't control.
Elon doesn't need our business. Let's be honest. He's fine.
He doesn't need mine. No. But in Facebook and Instagram, you can't. And I'm just Duff Gibson on those. And the book is The Tao of Sport. And it's just a series. Thank you for bringing that up, Colin. It's just a series of stories of, the fact that I was in high performance sport as an athlete, as a coach. I moved to Calgary to take my master's degree in kinesiology and work with the national speed skating team and synchro and volleyball and swimming and all these things. So I've come across a lot of amazing people, and I've always been interested in the mental aspects of it. So I thought, I'm not involved in high performance sport anymore. Where does that information go? So I wrote it all down. So maybe it's a good Christmas gift. Anyone's interested in it.
Absolutely.
It's on Audible, or Amazon.
Do you read it? Do you read it on Audible? Are you the one reading the book?
Yeah.
Narrator.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's
there
all
you
I'm
go.
getting then.
Okay. There's our Christmas gift to each other, Colin. That's what we're listening to. Cool runnings and listening to Duff's book. Simple. That's how it works. Duff, mate, seriously, it's been an absolute pleasure, and we really thank you for your time on the show today.
Thank you both very much. Really enjoyed that.